Welcome to True and Unpolished. Through this podcast, our intention is to uplift, amuse, and inspire you to create more of a life you'll love. Let's get authentic, everybody. So, hey, everybody, it's Lydia and Mary, and we have Amy Stafford back with us here today. The last time Amy was with us, we talked, and she vulnerably and beautifully shared her story of her divorce and how she navigated that with consciousness and found kind of her inner peace in doing that. And during the conversation, we learned that, she was very passionate about nutrition, and she got her master's in nutrition and was waiting for her license paperwork to come through. And it was right on the cusp of COVID and the paperwork was lost. And so she had to do kind of a pivot. But she has this passion for nutrition, and we really are excited to have her here today to give us and share with us her expertise in this area. But before we do that, Amy, can you tell us what got you into nutrition? Why did you get into it? What called to you?
Looking all the way back to my high school years, I've always had an interest in health and fitness and nutrition. My first college degree was in exercise science. I've always loved the outdoors. So I've always been inclined towards health, whether it's physical therapy, thinking about being a doctor, naturopathy, being a naturopath.
Yeah.
And so I've always been interested in nutrition. But what really, I think, struck me was it would have been in around 2008 when we moved to Washington. So my ex-husband was military, so we moved around quite a bit. The particular house we moved into in 2008 had toxic mold. Oh. And over the course of 6 months, myself and my daughter actually got fairly sick. Multiple emergency room visits. Nobody could figure out what was going on. And it wasn't until about 4 to 5 months into it that an ER doctor asked me, "Have you ever tried staying away from your house for 7 days?" And I was like, "No, why would I do that?" And she's like, "Well, you might want to consider mold as a possible culprit." So my parents live nearby, so we did. We moved out of the house for 7 days and everything cleared up.
Wow.
But so we went through the process of moving houses, but that didn't address the health issues I was having inside as a result of that 4 to 5 months of exposure. It messed my gut balance up pretty significantly, and inflammation was really high. So doctors, just the conventional medicine, just didn't have a good way to approach it or address it.
Right.
And that is what turned me to seeing a naturopath. And that really opened my eyes. So my original focus in nutrition was more from a fitness standpoint.
Yeah.
But this took my interest in nutrition and flipped it on its head to a more natural wellness, holistic, functional approach. And healing was the biggest one. How do we use food to heal? What do we need to avoid? And the power of what we put into our bodies is pretty amazing. Whether it's detrimental or whether it's helpful for us. So
wait a minute. Would you say that it's different for every person? Like one person's body is, so is nutrition just like it's like, here are the rules of nutrition, and if everybody does these rules, their body will be in balance? Or is it different for different people?
There's two different things I can say on this, because it's not exactly one or the other.
Okay.
As a general rule of thumb, there are some pretty basic nutritional rules that people should always follow, and that will raise people's vitality from a nutritional standpoint to a certain level. But to get beyond that level and really achieve true health and vitality and wellness, now you've got to look at those individual things, because everybody is truly unique, and there is no one size fits all.
Can you give us one or two of the basics, the ones that you would say are across the board or for everybody?
The first one I'm going to say is avoid sugars. Not sugars in general, but really limit the amount of added sugars in your diet. Added sugars is okay to have a certain amount, but in our society today, we generally overconsume pretty drastically the added sugars. So I'm talking, the granulated sugar that you find in the grocery
white
store,
sugar,
or even agave syrup can be pretty bad for you, and all of that if used too much. Honey can be bad for you if used too much, although I would say honey and natural maple syrup, coconut sugars. For added sugars, those are probably the healthier options, and they have other benefits that come with them.
I am not well versed in nutrition. Like I am sometimes better at listening to my body than others, and sometimes I even just try altogether not to listen to my body in any way. And so I'm working on that. That's something I'm working on. So when I I really like the what they call Mexican Coke, because it comes from Mexico and it says pure cane sugar. So I've always thought that pure cane sugar is better than like grabbing a Coke off of
corn syrup.
Yeah, corn syrup.
Yeah, because yes, so there are biochemical differences.
Okay.
And it's mostly in how our bodies process it. So your pure cane sugar is pretty balanced with glucose and fructose.
Okay.
And when you talk about high fructose corn syrup, the lab has skewed that percentage.
Yes.
And so fructose is primarily digested through our liver. Anything with a higher percentage of fructose concentrated forces your liver to work pretty hard, and it can lead towards fatty liver type situations. This is why apple juice is really bad. It's really high concentration of fructose.
You are kidding. Apple juice is really bad.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. So what juice is good?
Well, no fruit juice is truly great for you, but there are definite benefits to juicing. Orange juice so the juices you look for are the highest antioxidants.
Okay.
Really colorful, your pomegranate juices, your cherry juices, your orange juice has high in things like potassium and vitamin C, but even though those juices are better for you, you still need to not do too much. I would say a quarter to a half of a cup is as much as you want to drink at one time.
Yeah. Like I let my kids have one thing of juice a day and everything else is water. Like I've always lived by the rule, a little bit of things is okay. A lot of anything, not good. Like that's kind of the rule in my house.
Everything in moderation to an extent is kind of how I word it.
Okay. Yeah.
Because there are some things that even in moderation can be truly harmful.
Yeah.
One of those things is another thing I would say everybody should avoid, and that's trans fats.
Okay.
So hydrogenated fats, these are going to be your deep fat fried foods.
Yeah.
Your French fries. I'm sorry, Mary.
I know.
I bake my fries usually. I mean, I'll have occasionally.
So trans fats are pretty harmful to your body. And when you talk about heart disease and, saturated fats get such a bad name, but it's really your trans fats. Mm-hmm. And it's really your hydrogenated vegetable oils.
Yeah.
So you got to be really careful with the oils you're taking into your body, and you want to focus on, your more healthier options like olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil are going to be much better than your canolas and safflower oils that you typically see out there.
I have a question, Amy. Did you change your diet in 2008? I mean, you got interested and I just want to tell y'all, Amy, that like what she does is if she starts to get awareness about something, then she's on it. And job in the military, what I tell people, I'm sure I'm butchering this, but her job in the military was to take massive amounts of information that the spies brought in and then go through all of the information and succinctly prepare a report and give it to her superiors. So she's able to take massive amounts of information and pull out the most important stuff. And so I'm just curious, like, did you go from eating anything to not, like, changing your diet drastically, or what happened with that?
My change was pretty drastic, to the point where I took a big black garbage bag, actually three. I walked into my kitchen, I went through my pantry, my cabinets, and my fridge, and I filled those bags with foods that had either genetically modified ingredients, the high fructose corn syrup, that had any of the things that I knew that we as a household now needed to avoid as we were healing. So, little things like, your white flour products, crackers, and all of that. It all just went into big garbage bags and out to the trash. My pantry and fridge were pretty bare at that point, but for the next year, yes, it was really drastic. And but I felt amazing after, I would say, 4 to 6 months. And just the vitality, the clean foods that I started putting into my body. I had removed all processed foods for the most part, with the exception, everything in moderation, right? So, it's not that they were banned from the household. It's not that I never had a bite here and there. It's not like I swore off pizza and hamburgers forever. I would allow myself to have a teeny little bit of those if I wasn't going through a period where I needed to avoid a certain ingredient. But yes, it was a drastic change. And over the course of a year, I really started focusing on whole foods. I did a lot of juicing with green juices, smoothies every day. My fridge was full of colorful fruits and vegetables, and pasture raised, animal products, that were humanely raised and raised in a way that they would benefit me and didn't hurt. I also became environmentally conscious, interestingly, in this process.
Yes.
So yeah, it kind of raised my consciousness in more than just food.
Well, it's interesting because, like, I don't know, a year or 6 months, or very soon, shortly before I met you, I had kind of gone through the same thing, but I switched over to veganism. Only for, I did it for about 3 years, but that was right around the time that you and I met. And so I had consciously changed my eating habits. And I think the reason that I did was for health reasons. But then once I started learning about it, my motivation was, I found out what was happening to animals. And so that was my motivation to continue with it. And I don't eat vegan anymore, but I'm vegetarian still. So meeting Amy is how I was able to learn more, intellectually speaking, about what I was doing and why.
So I have two questions. Well, first, that I heard a similar story. Like, did you know that, like, and I know that they've been in the news recently and they're getting a divorce, but did you know that Bill and Melinda Gates did that thing? They literally, like, went through their pantry and, like, threw everything out and it was all empty. Like, they had the exact same experience. Like, when you were telling me that, I'm like, does she know that Bill and Melinda Gates did the same thing?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. So Bill and Melinda Gates did the same thing. And then they made it like this, it was a big initiative for them where they wanted to really go out and educate the public on nutrition and all of these things. Pushback. But one thing that I would say is that, the ability to do some of this comes from a place of privilege, a certain amount of privilege.
It does.
And the food that is as accessible to, those with lower incomes and, those who struggle financially, they don't have these kinds of options. And so I just want to be really careful and conscious about recognizing that there is a certain amount of privilege that comes with being able to really do that kind of drastic change. And so for, the average Joe, or for someone who, doesn't have those kinds of means, I think that, those basic kind of rules that we were talking about, the things that you were talking about, like avoid trans fats, and the sugar, like those things can be, adapted and accessible, I think, to everybody. And so then the second thing that I would say was, well, what would you say about the food pyramid? Because remember, like the food pyramid used to be like the Bible. And like, what if like now, all of, and this is in no way meant to belittle your expertise, but there was a time where very learned individuals would tell us that the food pyramid was the thing, and now we know that the food pyramid is not the thing. I mean, the food pyramid is what I learned, so how do we
We're
know?
evolving, Lydia.
I know.
That's a short answer. I mean, we have more information than we did.
Yes,
Yeah.
but what if?
So that's.
But we're gonna. But in 20 years, we're going to have more information than we do now.
Right.
So, it's really difficult for me. I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate.
No, and
ironic.
Actually, go ahead.
It's
Mary.
ironic too, because last week we were talking about, or a while back we were talking about the Jodish astrology, which that's thousands of years old. So there's something to be said about something that has stood the test of time too. But
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So Lydia, you've touched on some really big topics.
Yeah.
For me, nutritionally.
Yeah.
So, I actually do appreciate that you brought up the issue with demographics and food. It is so. In that previous podcast, we talked a little bit more about how my career just completely shifted.
Yes.
I moved away from really daily actively practicing nutrition on a daily basis to finding other ways to keep it active in my life and to help others. And so one of the areas, though, that is a passion within nutrition of mine is the fact that there are pockets in our country where people don't have access to fresh food, where they don't even have access to a full-size grocery store.
Right.
Their ability to really find ways to eat healthy is very limited.
Yeah.
They have food marts and fast food and, whatever the food bank is able to provide if they're in need. These programs that are out there that can assist with food, your social programs to provide funding to help get food. There's limitations within those as well.
Right.
As far as how much can be, WIC, that's very limited how much you can use on fresh food.
Yeah.
And so on that note, I am very aware of that. I do know a lot of programs out there that, where, you can get healthy, you can heal, you can do all this thing with food, but there is a huge portion of our population that's not available to.
Right.
And, here you have a family and they're trying to raise their kids in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And they're truly just limited. And there are some really good organizations out there who are working really hard to try to find ways to get that food to those people. A lot of gleaning happens at farms in local areas, and they bring that produce into city centers. Mm-hmm. There's gardens that are popping up inside city centers. And, they're slowly, very, very slowly, there are programs being brought, but it is nowhere near enough. There's too many people still. So, but that's a whole other topic.
It is. Agreed.
And then one of the other things you brought up was the food pyramid. So I'll try not to get too political with this one. So I don't know how familiar.
Doing great, by the way.
I don't know how familiar you are with, there's a difference between a nutritionist and a dietitian.
Right. Okay.
So when you're out there, even just job hunting as a nutritionist, it's really hard to find work because our industries and our society and our legislation has focused on dietitians. And I'll say this as basically as I can. So the food pyramid, the My Plate that's out there right now, some of these programs where they say one thing's good for you and others not, or this is how much of something you should have, or you should always get dairy in your diet, or this or that.
Yeah.
It's kind, if you go behind the scenes a little bit, it is driven a little bit by industry.
I imagine
they have some influence with those organizations that are making those recommendations to society.
Yeah.
So, and, if I was to say one thing that somebody could do for their health, especially if they have the means to do it, is to eat intuitively. Learn to eat intuitively, and learn to eat stuff as it's presented to you from the earth as much as possible.
Right.
Don't go and get all those processed foods with 20 ingredients, but if you eat whole foods and you eat intuitively, where you've learned to listen to your body and your body's signals, you'll over time, you don't need to worry about calories, about, you do have to be conscious of balance.
Yeah.
But, it is a really healthy way to approach nutrition. So I don't follow, and I never recommend that anybody follow the pyramid. The My Plate thing is a good visual, but I always say that your vegetables are your main portion, the main thing on your plate. It should take up at least half of your plate. Fruit is not a bad thing. I don't vilify fruit at all. But it's also, with the 7 servings that you should get of fruits and vegetables a day, you probably want 5 to be vegetables and 2 to be fruit, just, from a health standpoint. And then, your protein source and your grains, your whole grains, would be the other 2 portions, but they're definitely smaller.
Here's what I will say, that I have over time just intuitively changed things about my diet, about my kids' diet. And I think that what's really important is that the more mindful you become in each arena in your life, in your relationships, in your work, in what you eat, the more natural it's going to be for you to pick up the thing that your body needs and will feed you and be what's best for you. And I would say that, for people who do not have the means to, throw everything out and start again, you can start small, like you start little bits at a time, like take that vegetable recommendation, take that from the earth recommendation and do it as much as you can. Take that eggs, humanely raised, organic brown eggs. That's a great way to make a switch. There are ways in which we can switch, right? Incrementally, that incrementally will help us. Would you say that, if you had 2 that you would just say, start here, for somebody that literally, it's all processed foods in their cupboard, and milk and the whole thing, they're just going crazy in there in the kitchen, what would you do you have 2 or 3 that you'd say just start here?
Yeah, and sometimes the more powerful nutritional improvements aren't what you add, it's what you take out.
Okay, cool.
So I would say start by slowly removing the more harmful ingredients, and sugars is at the top of the list for me. Simple grains, your white breads, your white pastas, definitely try to limit those as much as possible and remove if you can.
Did you have something, Mary?
Well, I was just thinking about what is rotting in my refrigerator right now, which isn't much, because I eat I eat a lot of vegetables, but I would think whether we have the means or not, there's a lot of us that have that throw things away because we've our eyes are bigger than our stomach, or our intentions are good. And so just being mindful of what we purchase, and also, being mindful of using the things that we purchase, and whether we have means or not, those are things that we can do, that is environmentally conscious as well, not just financially conscious.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Well, Amy, I am so grateful once again for you being here today and for talking to us about nutrition, especially for those like me who endeavor to make good choices. I think we would say that, the parting thought is always mindfulness. It's, taking breaths, slowing down. And the more that we take breaths, slow down, meditate, take time to quiet our thoughts, the more mindful we become in all of our decision making. And when we do that, we are intuitively going to go to the right choices, the things that our bodies need. The wisdom that we need is within us. And if we can quiet those thoughts down, we can access it. So thank you once again, Amy, for being here. You have been listening to True and Unpolished, the podcast. Let's see what happens next.